Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on injury loss trends in the transportation injury industry, and mitigation strategies. Presenting today are myself, Samantha Brooks, Maggie McKay, and Vern Green. Vern and I are loss control representatives for West Bend Mutual in Wisconsin, and Maggie is located in Iowa. We're going to go through our presentation today. And we'll be discussing a number of different resources that we have available throughout the presentation. So those are included in a handout file as well, but if you have any other questions, please hang around and feel free to ask those at the end of the webinar. So with that, let's get into it. During this webinar, we're going to discuss what the Argent data suggests are the three leading causes of injury amongst transportation company employees, both in frequency and severity of claims. We're then going to review what key programs, policies, and employee training your organization should have in place to help reduce these leading causes of injury, and what resources West Bend has available for you to help implement these fundamental programs. To assess transportation loss trends among West Bend Argent insureds, we looked at claims that have been reported since 2017 under transportation loss codes, which would include trucking, both local and long haul. When looking at transportation causes of injury by frequency of losses, slips, trips, and falls are the most frequent. These injuries would include falls from equipment as well as slips and falls on ice or any other falls occurring while the employee is at work. Material handling injuries are the second leading cause of injury by frequency. These injuries include any sprains, strains, or repetitive motion injuries sustained by employees. These could be sustained from lifting or tasks like fifth wheel pin pulling or cranking dollies. Looking at the chart that's up on your screen now, interaction with objects would appear to be the third leading cause of injury in terms of injury frequency. However, this term actually groups together a wide range of more specific injury causes like cuts and scrapes, struck by objects, caught in or between objects, injuries while using hand tools. So because this is a somewhat varied group of injuries, we'll be focusing instead on motor vehicle accidents as our third leading cause of injury by frequency. Looking at transportation causes of injury by loss severity, meaning the amount incurred for any medical costs, lost wage benefits, and other costs of managing the claim, slips, trips, and falls still come in at the top of our list. Motor vehicle accidents become the second leading cause of injury by severity, and manual material handling injuries are third. Throughout this webinar, we'll discuss these three most common and most severe causes of injury within the transportation industry, as well as programs and best practices we recommend your organization has in place to help reduce them. We'll start by discussing slips, trips, and falls. Out of the 496 slip, trip, fall injuries noted in the previous section, many of these falls, almost 40% among drivers and mechanics, occur as employees are either ascending or descending equipment. This could include getting in and out of cabs or trailers or during other tasks like tarping. Another leading cause of slips and falls among transportation industry employees are falls on ice and snow. These winter weather falls are common amongst drivers who frequently have to walk across icy lots that your organization doesn't have much control over. Slip and fall injuries frequently lead to strains, contusions, sprains, and fractures. If we look at the severity for slip and fall injuries, falls from different levels tend to be the most severe, followed by falls on ice or snow. Fractures are the most severe types of injuries caused by slips and falls, often impacting employee ribs, ankles, and wrists. These injuries also lead to the highest indemnity payments for transportation injury employees, as they lead to, a lot of time off of work. As we look to control our slip, trip, fall exposures, it is important to understand where these losses are occurring. Review your organization's loss data for the past 3 to 5 years and look for trends in the causes of slip, trip, fall injuries, as well as the location of those losses. Are they occurring outside, inside, during the winter months, while employees are getting on or off of equipment or using ladders? Once we understand where our injuries are occurring, we can begin to form a plan to address them. Once we review losses and identify root cause and location trends, we should move on to identifying common factors that contribute to these slip and fall incidents. This could include building or parking lot lighting, the condition of entrance mats and runners or ramps, general flooring and parking lot conditions, or weather conditions. Your organization should ensure that roles and responsibilities for slip, trip, fall prevention are clearly identified for employees across all levels of your organization. This would range from HR employees to upper management to maintenance or drivers. If you have existing footwear or winter slip, trip, fall prevention policies in place, they should be reviewed to determine if they are actually addressing the exposures you identified in the review of your losses and addressing the other contributing factors you've identified. Are they effective in addressing these factors, or do we need to make revisions? If no existing policies are in place, then we should create them, and we're going to cover key elements of these policies in just a little bit. Employee training on slip, trip, fall prevention should cover any relevant policies and procedures, as well as include awareness campaigns covering things like winter safety or 3 points of contact. Your overall slip, trip, fall prevention program should then be reevaluated periodically to ensure that it's still effective and meeting the needs of your organization. A crucial facet of your overall slip, trip, fall prevention program is having a footwear policy, which should be enforced just like any other company safety policy or PPE policy. Key components of your footwear policy should include who the policy covers. Does it apply to all employees or only employees like drivers and mechanics and maintenance staff? It should include information on footwear selection, including basic info on reading footwear labels, as well as information on prohibited footwear. The policy should cover options for purchasing footwear or any approved footwear vendors, as well as any reimbursement or payroll deduction programs that your company has in place. It should outline any supervisor footwear inspections or footwear age tracking that will be in place. You can also outline policies on replacing footwear based on their age or evidence of wear. And the policy should include details on, enforcing the policy, including any disciplinary actions that are in place for noncompliance. The footwear policy is also where you can include information regarding any over-the-shoe traction devices that staff should be wearing during the winter months. Your policy should note who will be in charge of overseeing employee compliance, as well as who will administer the program in regards to any reimbursement programs. We recommend that you cover this policy at the time the employee is hired, and then it's also beneficial to review the policy periodically for existing staff. If you do not already have a footwear policy in place, we would suggest that you consider using a sample policy from your footwear vendor company if you're working with like a Shoes for Crews or a Zappos or any other vendor you may work with. Or West Bend has two different sample footwear policies available to you that are included in that handout packet, one being LC 1007 or the updated LC 1011. We would recommend that you consult with your HR department as well as your legal contact on any policies that you're looking to put into place before they're actually rolled out to employees. Moving on to looking at specific footwear requirements, a set of sturdy, slip-resistant sole shoes or boots will help prevent slips and falls on oil or water and ice and snow. I would make a distinction between anti-slip footwear and slip-resistant shoes. Anti-slip shoes, which could be just a typical athletic style shoe, are designed to improve traction. However, a slip-resistant shoe is designed to improve friction between the sole of the shoe and the walking surface. Soft rubber soles tend to grip floors better, and employees should avoid hard plastic or leather soles. The outsole tread pattern of the employee's shoes should be both raised and recessed, as well as intertwined to allow liquid to be channeled away from under the outsole of the shoe. Outsoles should have small snips to help move liquid to outer portions of the outsole, and a heel design that's round with a raised tread pattern and with leading edges in various directions. Outsoles with a flat or enclosed tread pattern can trap liquid under the outsole and form a barrier between the shoe and the walking surface, creating a condition that reduces traction, sort of like hydroplaning in a car. Unacceptable footwear includes, like I said, leather soles or smooth soles, cowboy boots or any other heeled shoes, flip-flops or sandals, clog-style shoes, which would include Crocs, and damaged or severely worn footwear. Your organization should also complete a PPE assessment to determine if any additional protective features like safety toe caps are needed for your employees. During the winter months, especially here in the Midwest, we will be faced with, the challenges of navigating off-site environments like truck stops, client sites, or rest areas where your organization can't control how snow and ice is being removed. Over-the-shoe traction devices can help prevent costly slips and falls for drivers during the winter. And there are actually several models of traction devices that are designed for individuals who frequently transition from outdoor to indoor settings or who drive. The use of these devices should be outlined in your footwear policy, and staff should be re-educated on the importance of this equipment and the use of the equipment on an annual basis. So when should we look at replacing footwear? I mentioned a couple times that your policy should outline when footwear needs to be replaced or what unacceptable footwear is in terms of wear and tear. A good analogy to use when discussing shoe condition with your drivers or other employees is to compare the soles of their shoes to the tires on their vehicle. If our shoes have bad tread and they're very worn or they're worn very unevenly, they have less traction, which can lead to dangerous accidents and actually pose more of a safety hazard. Employees and supervisors can also use the battery test as a rule of thumb when evaluating shoe wear. And the battery test consists of just taking a double A battery and comparing it to the treads on the employee's shoe. If the double A battery is wider than the tread, the shoe fails and then should be replaced, like the image on the left on the bottom here. If the battery is not wider than the shoe treads, the shoe is still good and the treads are, acceptable, at least in that area of the shoe. Employees should be trained on how to assess the condition of their footwear, and any expectations for inspections or permitted age should be outlined in the footwear policy. Another key policy that your organization should have in place to help prevent slips and falls for drivers is a 3 points of contact policy. We recommend that you have a policy in place requiring drivers to use 3 points of contact whenever climbing or descending equipment. This policy should require that drivers enter and exit facing the cab, use 3 points of contact, meaning either 2 feet and one hand or both hands and one foot when dismounting or mounting the cab. They should make sure that all surfaces and handrails are free of ice, snow, or any other debris, and that they should take their time when ascending or descending equipment. This policy should prohibit drivers from jumping or hopping out of the cab, using the door frame or edge as a handle, or using tires or wheel hubs as steps when getting into their vehicle. This policy should also apply to other tasks like tarping or entering or getting out of trailers as well, and should be enforceable just like any other safety policy that you have in place. So speaking of tarping, this is a really inherently dangerous task that puts drivers at risk of falling or sustaining other injuries. You should try to put controls in place that will reduce the need for drivers or other employees to climb or descend equipment or the load itself while tarping. And best practices should be enforced, starting with employees wearing the proper footwear and using 3 points of contact. If possible, a forklift should be used to place the tarp on the load, and the employee should then use a ladder to access the load. They should make sure they're inspecting the side rails and the rungs of the ladder and ensuring that it's on solid footing. And if applicable, they should be making sure that the ladder extends 3 feet above the load and that they're setting it up to the proper angle. Prior to beginning tarping, you should ensure that necessary or available fall prevention, protection, or arrest methods are in place, which could include the use of low-profile trailers, self-unloading tippers, or vehicles with detachable trays for ground-level loading and unloading. We should be trying to avoid staff having to walk on the load if at all possible. If your drivers must adjust tarps while they're on the road, they should avoid adjusting them on the roadside and instead make all efforts to move to a truck stop or another safe area. They should use a ladder to access the top of the load and still follow all of those same safety procedures I just mentioned. They should assess the work area on top of the load for any cracks or gaps that could lead to trips before unrolling the tarp, and they should attempt to stay as close to the center line as possible when unrolling tarps. And as always, like I said, ensure that they are wearing appropriate footwear and using 3 points of contact during any tarping tasks. If you have questions or want more information, you can refer to the West Bend Client Use Document LC1006 for more information. So while I won't go into great depth about winter slip trip fall prevention, as that could be an entire presentation on its own, I do want to touch on, some key components of your winter slip trip fall prevention program that should be in place. The first of those components is, assigning roles and responsibilities. We need to ensure that, someone is assigned to kind of administer the program, that someone's assigned to complete the physical assessments of your lots, someone's assigned to the actual snow removal and inspections during winter events, someone's in charge of maintaining entrance mats and other equipment, reporting hazards, and then training employees as well. When looking at roles and responsibilities throughout your organization uh, for winter slip trip fall prevention, I'd like to promote the idea that these roles and responsibilities should be integrated into existing is likely to create additional work and is less likely to succeed. Your snow removal plan should be developed to include where the snow will be piled to ensure that it doesn't impede access to the building or cause damage from melting and flooding. And we need to make sure we're not obstructing the view of drivers in the lot or walkways. The plan should include when snow will be removed as far as, what time of day or prior to shift change. And these kind of criteria for snow removal should be based on clear and objective, data. Uh, West Bend has, written logs available if you would like for your organization to help with monitoring or, assuring the quality of your snow removal, whether that's an internal thing or you are taking it out to a vendor. We should be ensuring that equipment for snow removal is in good operating condition well prior to the anticipated start of the season, which, in Wisconsin, we never quite know. Sometimes we end up with snow at the end of October already, but especially given recent supply chain concerns, it's a good idea to make sure that any parts or equipment repairs you need are ordered or coordinated well in advance. If you are outsourcing some or all of your snow removal, it's important to have a written contract and a signed contract with your vendor that has specific language as far as when they're going to come out or when they're going to come back to remove snow. Your winter slip trip fall prevention program should not be limited to just external hazards. We need to make sure that internal mats and signage are adequate and they're in place to help protect staff from slips and falls from snow that might get tracked into the building. And finally, you want to make sure that as far as training for your winter slip and fall prevention program, that you have training for staff on the snow removal process, any inspections that need to get completed, reporting winter hazards and the correction of those hazards. who's going to investigate any winter slip and fall incidents, proper footwear, how we expect them to park, and then hazard awareness as well. The best way to eliminate a hazard is to remove the potential for the hazard to be created. We can't control Mother Nature, but we can control how much employees are exposed to ice and snow hazards. A thorough physical inspection of exterior areas related to the potential for winter hazards is important and should be completed prior to the season, ideally during late spring when issues can be fixed over the summer months. Your Argent or West Bend loss control consultant can help you with a sample inspection form as well as looking at external hazards prior to the winter season. Another good, method of identifying hazards might be um, employee surveys or again looking at that loss data. Some examples of hazards that are important to look for include, general trip and fall hazards throughout parking lots or walkways that could become hidden under snow and ice or worsened by snow and ice throughout the winter. Um, Another good hazard to look for is the direction of drainage created by downspouts that can create significant hazards during thaw and refreeze periods. Look for, potential pooling water across walkways that could cause hazards around your building. Looking for standing water as well as signs of low spots in parking lots and walkways will help identify additional potential refreeze hazards. Frozen slush can create an uneven surface, potentially causing a slip and fall. Hazards can require more significant repairs and cost if the source of the water can't be addressed. You can create barriers to prevent access to those areas until correction is possible. Look at the lighting of your parking lots, look at the condition of your gutters. We want to look at any area where there's potential for water to thaw and pool and then refreeze, causing slick, dangerous areas. Clearing to the bare pavement should be the gold standard of your snow removal program and your winter slip fall prevention program. Any amount of snow, slush, or ice will be a slip fall hazard. The two pictures towards the top of this slide are parking lots that are in the same town, just a few minutes apart. The owner of the lot on the right said that their snow removal vendor was not able to clear the lot to the bare pavement. The photo on the left is a parking lot, like I said, in the same town, few minutes apart. Obviously, between their snow removal and whatever ice melt product they're using, they were able to clear the lot to the bare pavement. The photo on the bottom left is the driver's view from their cab of a snowy parking lot. And I think we can all agree that that's not a safe working condition. It's not safe for the driver to get out of their cab on that parking lot. And we have a very high likelihood of a slip and fall in that environment. So in regards to training for your overall slip trip fall prevention program, as I said, training should be completed at hire and we recommend annually thereafter, as well as any other season-specific training or awareness campaigns like winter safety. You may need to retrain drivers or, a wider group of staff post-incident or injury, and they should be trained on any relevant policies, like I said, on footwear in terms of appropriate footwear and footwear condition. Then they should also be trained on those behavior expectations as far as 3 points of contact and any other specific hazard training related to their job. You should review your slip trip fall prevention program periodically, I would say probably annually, to ensure that it's effective in preventing injuries. Consider setting objective and measurable and achievable goals related to slip trip fall prevention that your organization would like to focus on. That might be, identifying and correcting hazards from inspections, completing snow and ice inspection logs during winter events, employees wearing proper footwear, or using something like an employee or customer satisfaction survey related to your facility maintenance and safety. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Maggie McKay to discuss material handling injuries.
Thank you, Sam. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So here we're looking at manual material handling claims. This is Argent's claims since 2017 for all transportation accounts, broken down to the next level. As you can see, the leading cause of claims is pushing and pulling, followed by lifting and lowering, then twisting and bending, repetitive motion, manual material handling reaching, followed by holding and carrying. Then if we look at the losses, which is the total dollar amount of the claim, it follows the same trend with leading with pushing and pulling, followed by lifting and lowering, and so on. So what is manual material handling? Manual material handling is simply a person moving something. It is the use of physical force to lift, lower, push, pull, carry, hold, or restrain an object. Ergonomic risk factors are workplace situations that cause wear and tear on the body and can cause injury. Ergonomic risk factors are commonly found in manual material handling activities. These primary factors are awkward postures, which include bending and twisting, highly repetitive motions, which include frequently reaching, lifting, and carrying, forceful exertions, which is carrying or lifting heavy loads, and then static postures, which includes gripping tools, holding the arms out or up to perform tasks, or standing in one place for a prolonged period of time. If a task includes multiple risk factors, the risk of injury is higher. Manual material handling injuries do not have an easy fix. There is no one solution. OSHA has provided 7 steps to address manual material injuries through a comprehensive effort. Number 1, provide management support. Management commitment produces higher levels of motivation for health and safety throughout the organization. Support is indicated by the proportion of resources, including time, money, and people, and the status given to health and safety versus production or cost. Number 2, involve workers in hazard assessment. In hazard assessment, solution development, and also implementation. This promotes buy-in and creates a culture that promotes safety. Number 3, provide training so that workers are aware of the ergonomic benefits and what activities or zones are ergonomically hazardous, and why it is important to report early symptoms of injuries. Number 4, identify ergonomic problems in the workplace before they result in injury. This can come from employees reporting tasks that have risk factors or job observations performed by the management team to identify at-risk activities. Number 5, encourage early reporting of symptoms, which is important to prevent serious injuries and lost time claims. The earlier you discover the signs of fatigue and discomfort, the better. That way you can actually do something about the fatigue and discomfort before it develops into an injury that requires medical treatment. When you receive reports of early injury, respond quickly and with enthusiasm. Number 6, implement solutions to control these hazards. This includes planning the workflow to eliminate unnecessary lifting, lowering, and carrying of materials. Employers and safety managers should consider using simple devices such as dollies, carts, lift tables, extendable conveyors, winches, and hoists. Employers can reduce the amount of time spent on these tasks by rotating workers through the tasks. In addition, clearing spaces can improve the access to materials being handled, which allows the worker to get closer and reduces the amount of reaching, bending, and twisting. And then number 7, evaluate your progress periodically to ensure continuous improvement and long-term success. If your equipment isn't properly maintained, injuries can occur. Preventative maintenance is the care and protection of tools, equipment, machines, and vehicles in order to keep them in safe and usable condition. Ensure that drivers are both reporting these defects and getting a proper response from the shop. Often injuries occur from maintenance issues that have been reported multiple times. Not only can accidents hurt your company's bottom line, they can also take an enormous toll on the motivation and morale of your employees. Pre and post inspection should identify the damaged tools and equipment. The company should identify what is an acceptable risk where the employee can continue working with the tools or equipment versus when moving forward and using the equipment is considered too hazardous and must be taken out of service. As a professional truck driver, you spend most of your day sitting in a stationary position. After long, continuous periods of driving, you feel anything but limber and ready for physical activity when you finally stop and get out of the truck. Prolonged sitting has been shown to decrease blood flow, increase the risk of pulled muscles, blood clots, swelling in the legs, varicose veins, and contribute to back pain. When not driving, drivers are cranking trailer dollies, pulling the fifth wheel pin, unloading freight, climbing out of the truck, pushing and pulling carts and dollies. All of these activities have ergonomics risk factors discussed in the previous slides. Stretching can provide your muscles with fresh oxygen and remove byproducts, reducing overall fatigue. It can improve flexibility, balance, and posture, as well as muscle coordination. By getting our muscles ready, we can make tasks like cranking dollies, fifth wheel pin pulling, and general bending or twisting easier on our bodies. In addition to stretching, exercise will increase the driver's fitness and reduce the risk of injury. The American Heart Association recommends at least 150 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise every week. Move for 30 minutes, 5 days a week, and you will achieve this goal. Moderate aerobic activities include walking at a brisk pace, leisurely biking, and everyday activities like gardening and cleaning. Remember that any amount of physical activity is better than none. Start with little changes. Small steps can lead to big improvements in not only your physical health, but your mental health, sleep schedule, productivity, and overall quality of life. When evaluating manual material handling activities, we need to work with our hands in the preferred work zone. Working with your hands in the preferred work zone, represented by the blue rectangle, offers the best protection from musculoskeletal disorders. Working with your hands in the acceptable work zone, represented with the yellow rectangle, also provides injury prevention to a lesser extent. Working with your hands in the preferred and acceptable work zones, collectively called the safe work zones, will reduce the risk of your muscles, joints, bones, and soft tissues. Working outside of the safe work zones has been shown to cause injury in formal research literature. The chart defines the safe work zones by where your hands are located while pushing, pulling, lifting, carrying, or otherwise exerting force. In the following slides, we are going to review common tasks for drivers, discussing the best practices. During these slides, we will discuss tools that can make tasks easier and techniques employees should be trained on to prevent injuries. It's not enough to simply train the employees and provide the tools. These need to be set as standards, and employees need to be held to these practices. Drivers are often required to pull different types of dollies and hand trucks and hand jacks. These activities increase the possibility of strain and sprain injuries. There are guidelines to how much weight and how much push-pull force is considered safe for a worker. When exceeding this guideline, the use of powered equipment is recommended. The maximum load on a cart should not exceed 250 pounds. Keep heavy items low on the cart, and the maximum weight should decrease if the frequency is high or if the distance traveled is greater than 50 feet. Specially designed hand carts should be used to negotiate ramps, curbs, and stairs. And in addition, the composition and diameter of the wheels can significantly change the amount of force required to use a hand cart. Generally, the larger the wheel diameter, the less force is required to move the load. Pushing versus pulling. Pulling is generally recognized as more hazardous than pushing. Pushing allows you to use your stronger muscles and eliminates the twisting of the trunk. In addition, if you slip and fall, the cart is less likely to roll over you compared to pulling. Use your legs, shoulders, and back when pushing. Get a firm grip and maintain good balance, keeping a wide stance. Maintain good momentum when you are underway so you don't get hung up on dock plates or elevation changes. In addition, don't pull or push with one hand. Use two hands to distribute the impact on your body and avoid twisting. Ramps can increase the risk of injury when using carts and dollies. To reduce the risk of injury, ramps should not exceed a 26% grade or a 1 to 4 pitch. Otherwise, powered equipment should be used. Hand-operated brakes should be provided on any hand cart that is used to negotiate a sloped surface. Workers should always be upgrade from the load to prevent them from possibly being crushed by the load. In other words, push the load down the ramp and pull the load up the ramp with two hands. Here are two resources that can be found on WB Connect that go into more detail about best practices for ramp and liftgate safety. Although it is a routine task, drivers should take care when working to open and close trailer doors. There are two common types of injuries. First, excessive force used to open the door, and second is the wind catching the door, causing an impact wound to the driver. Trailer doors may become difficult to open for a variety of reasons. As load may have shifted, parts could be in disrepair, or environmental factors could have impacted the door mechanism. When opening trailer doors, be sure to use both hands in a steady, controlled motion. Ensure that all regular maintenance is completed to keep the doors and handles in good working condition, and consider equipment to add additional leverage to the door handles. For example, the ergo bar pictured above. Doors can also move suddenly due to wind or shifted loads within the trailer. Be sure to stand to the side when opening or closing the door. Keep a firm grasp until it is safely secured. If the wind or a falling load does catch the trailer door, let it go. Trying to catch a moving door can result in injuries to the shoulder and back. Handling tractor doors. Checking under the hood should be part of your daily pre-trip inspection. Lifting and lowering the hood can be hazardous when done incorrectly. Make sure you are out of the way of strong winds and away from traffic. Always lift the door with steady pressure and never tug or jerk at the hood. After the latches are done, position yourself to the passenger side of the cab next to the wheel. Maintain a staggered power stance with one foot in front of the other and place your hands under the wheel well. Shift your weight forward to begin lifting. Based on your size, lift the hood as far as you can from this position on the side of the vehicle. Do not attempt to lift the hood by facing away from the tractor while pulling on the handle. Strapping is a common load securement task that some drivers complete multiple times in a day. This can require strenuous pushing or pulling on winch bars to apply enough tension to properly secure the load. Drivers sustain preventable shoulder and back injuries when cranking down on binders and winches. Winch bars can kick back or slip out of the winches, striking the driver in the face, causing serious injuries. Here are some practical tips that will make these tasks safer and more efficient for drivers. Work in the safe work zone, keeping your hands below shoulder level and centered on the body, like the picture above. This puts you where you are strongest and least prone to injury. Ratcheting binders are safer compared to level snap binders because they take less muscle force to operate and have less kickback potential. Use winch bars that have a specifically designed end to fit into the handle of the binder. These will not slip off the handle while providing additional leverage, and they will prevent the driver from working at low angles. Raising or lowering the landing gear on a trailer seems like an easy, common sense task, but this routine task can cause serious injuries to the shoulder, wrist, back, and face. Trailer dollies are constantly exposed to the elements such as the weather, road grit, and ice melt, which can gum up the crank, making it hard to turn. When force is required because the weight is applied, it is best to utilize the dolly's lowest gear, standing parallel to the trailer. Use two hands on the handle and engage the leg muscles, not just the shoulder. This position will also decrease the shear force on the spine, eliminating twisting. When the weight is removed from the dollies and the crank arm rotates freely, stand facing the trailer and keep two hands on the crank to avoid being hit by the handle. Do not quick spin the crank handle with your fingers. This is a common act that leads to face strike injuries. And here's another resource that can be found on WB Connect, going into detail about best practices for cranking dollies. The required force and bent posture necessary to pull a fifth wheel pin release makes this a dangerous task, likely to cause injuries to the driver's back, shoulder, and/or hands. Pulling the pin generally requires anywhere from 37 to 77 pounds of force, with an average of 50 pounds. The condition of the fifth wheel, the slope, and the terrain underneath the cab can create binding condition that requires even higher force to pull the pin. So park the trailer on a level surface and ensure enough space between your truck and other trailers to safely pull the pin. Use a pin pulling tool that has a defined curve to reduce the risk of slip off, like the picture above. When pulling the fifth wheel pin, face the trailer squarely. Use a stable power stance with one foot in front of the other and provide a wide base of support. Use two hands on the pull tool and avoid twisting motions. If you cannot pull the pin, there may be too much pressure on the trailer, and the trailer may need to be nudged to release this pressure. Ideally, equip your cabs with an electric or pneumatic powered fifth wheel release to eliminate the need to manually pull the release lever. This is the safest way to release the pin. Here is another resource that can be found on WB Connect that goes into details about fifth wheel pin pulling. And I'm now going to pass it on to Vern to discuss motor vehicle accidents.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate it. My topic is motor vehicle accidents. I'm going to cover a number of things today. And first of all, I want to do is talk about the number of accidents that we've had and realized since 2017. So there's been a total of 270 motor vehicle claims between 2017 and 21. 14% of the claims that we've had were from motor vehicle accidents. So if you think about the number there, that the severity of that's pretty high. You start looking at it, we have $10,595,739 in losses from motor vehicle accidents alone. So it's clearly a very significant number, and we want to try to acknowledge that and do what we can to minimize those losses. Motor vehicle accidents occur from a number of different things. So what I want to do today is try to cover 5 primary topics that we're going to discuss here as far as things that can and have related to motor vehicle accident. The first one is distracted driving. Specifically, we're going to touch on cell phone policies and what your company may have in place or choose to put in place to consider cell phone use at all with the vehicles, your drivers, and how you should address that. Pre-trip inspections, obviously very important. We're going to go over different subject matter as far as pre-trip inspections, what you want to look for, policies that should be in place, and things of that nature. And then your driver education and training. This is obviously critical, especially if you have drivers that are driving 18-wheelers, semi-trucks, or anything that would require CDL or things of that nature. There are certain required levels of training and certification. And then there are also things that you might want to just choose to do to make sure that internally your people are trained to the specific load or the specific vehicle that they might be dealing with on a daily basis. Then weather-related concerns are huge in Wisconsin for us, obviously in the winter, but also in the summer. There's things that we want to consider there, things to look at and consider as far as the vehicle, how it handles in the winter, and things of that nature. And then finally, dash cams. We're going to talk about cameras, how they can be beneficial for your company, and how they can help drivers, not be something that drivers should be afraid of. So first of all, the distracted driving, cell phone policies. So your company, first of all, has to have a safety culture that embraces cell phone policy in the sense that if your company says we don't have any policy, cell phones can be used or not, that's an issue, and that's something that from the top down doesn't send the proper message. So you want to do what you can to have a policy in place. You want to make sure that safety culture is shared from the top of the company down. When the policy is there, the understanding from the people is that the cell phone use is not allowed, and we have a policy on it, and that everybody needs to follow it. You want to communicate that down through to all staff. So the top level management all the way down to the drivers in the field, mechanics, anyone who would be utilizing a vehicle, driving a vehicle, they need to understand that the cell phone use is not allowed, and we have a policy that outlines when and how it can be used. So that communication is huge. When you develop the policy, you have to have input from all staff. So sometimes you see where a policy will be developed and it's written by people who may not be out on the road doing the job day to day. So don't write a policy that just absolutely 100% bans the use of cell phones for any reason at any time. You can't have them with you, because clearly there's times when you would like to have a cell phone in an emergency situation or something like that. So the policy just has to clarify when and how it's appropriate to utilize a cell phone when you're operating your vehicles and driving a truck or a vehicle down the road. Then policy enforcement. Having a policy is only as good as the enforcement of the policy. So if you have a policy, your people are expected to follow the policy, but yet when they don't follow the policy, there's no accountability or enforcement, then that kind of, deters from the real intent of the policy. Those last two things, policy enforcement and staff accountability, go hand in hand. So you have to communicate to the staff. You have to get their involvement when you write the policy to make sure it's fully functional. And then you also have to make sure that they understand that the policy will be enforced and they will be held accountable if they choose not to follow the policy or for some reason go outside of the company policy. So cell phones are something that we all know is incredibly distractive, and that can be talking on the cell phone, texting on the cell phone, or anything of that nature. Now, you might have a policy that you choose to put in place that allows for hands-free use. But again, take a look at the whole thing and see how much of a hands-free is it? Because if it still requires them to dial a number or to hit some buttons or something to initiate that call, even though the discussion and the talking that they're doing might be hands-free, they may still be distracted just trying to initiate that call or receive a call coming in and accept that call. So keep all that stuff in mind when you're looking at different policies that you want to put in place and how you want those to work. So some resources that we have at Westman Mutual is LC 1026, a distracted driving document. Now, this is a resource that we have. It's available to you. You can get it through WB Connect if you have that, or you can get it through your loss control representative. Just contact them and they can make this available for you. But this has a statement in here that I think is really critical. It says if a driver must make a phone call, they should pull over to a safe place to make the call. And that's the key, is a safe place. Now, if the vehicle breaks down on the highway and they can't get off to a safe place, that's understandable. But if they have the ability, a light comes on, something happens, they blow a tire, and they have the ability to get up to the next exit or to go to the next point where they can pull into a parking lot or something like that, have them get off to a safe place where they're not going to impede the flow of traffic, they're not going to cause any type of other issues, and pull off in there before making the call. Okay, and then as it says here, using hands-free phone while driving could result in an accident. So that's the thing, the hands-free doesn't necessarily mean that you never touch the phone, right? It doesn't mean that. It means basically you're talking without having to hold the phone. But even if the phone is in a cradle on the dash, if you have to initiate that call by reaching over, looking at it, touching it, and choosing options, that creates a problem. So like say, even 27 seconds after the call, the brain of the person still is in somewhat of a distracted mode. And so drivers can remain in that for that period of time, which takes their mind, their eyes, and everything off of their main job, which is to drive that vehicle and be safe on the road. So the AAA, American Automobile Association, provided that information. And I think it's probably pretty accurate if you just think about when you're driving and things going on and you see other people on their phones or doing stuff, it's just incredibly hazardous. So please get a good policy in place and stop your folks from doing that. Pre-trip inspections is the next thing that I want to talk about. This is a huge part of any pre-trip for any vehicle. This is not just tractor trailers, semi-trucks, or delivery vehicles or anything else. Even if you have sedans, you have regular vehicles, SUVs, minivans, or anything. If you have any of those at your company that are used by your staff, or even for you personally, when you go on a trip with your family, you should always be doing this pre-trip inspection. Okay. And again, this kind of starts in your company with that company culture. So if you have a bunch of company vehicles and the pre-trip inspection is really only expected to be conducted by the people that are driving the semis or the bobtail trailers or tractors or, cube vans or something like that, it might send the wrong message. So if you have sedans, if your executive staff has their personal SUV that they have that's a company vehicle. Try to set that tone and that culture by doing pre-trip inspections before heading out with those vehicles as well. So once you have that culture there that everybody knows that pre-trip inspections are important, then you want to look at that policy. You want to put the policy together again, utilizing every person, the drivers for every type of vehicle should be questioned and should be asked about what they think is important and what they think should be included in the pre-trip inspection. So you want, because every type of vehicle is going to have a little bit different inspection depending on the type of vehicle, the type of fuel, whether or not it's air brakes or not. There's just many different things that are going to come into play there. So with that, you have to have training. So any driver, regardless of what type of vehicle they're going to be driving for you, they should get training on that vehicle specifically. You can have overall training, which is kind of comprehensive for all vehicles, but then it should be specific to any vehicle that they would be operating on what the expectations are for that pre-trip inspection on that vehicle. And once that training's there, then with each vehicle, there should be a checklist. That checklist is specific to that vehicle, is specific to things that should be checked on that vehicle. For instance, you've got semi-tractor trailers, you've got some of the larger cube vans and things of that nature. They all have air brakes. Checking air brakes on a vehicle is much different than getting into a sedan with regular brakes that are hydraulic with brake fluid. So you want to have stuff in there that teaches them how to do it, a checklist to make sure that when they do it, they know what to do and they've checked off that they've done each of those things. That checklist then obviously goes into the documentation portion. If somebody's doing a pre-trip inspection and they realize that there is a defect or a fault somewhere on anything, then they need to document that properly. That documentation then needs to be conveyed to the proper individuals to make sure that they follow up on it. Does it go to maintenance? Does it go to a supervisor? Does it go to, who does it go to document it and make sure that somebody addresses it? So having the policy in place is great. Having the checklist and everything is great. But if somebody marks something as being deficient and it never makes it to the appropriate person to fix it, then it kind of defeats that whole purpose. So make sure you have a complete system to where you can identify it, you can document it, you can convey it to the proper individuals, and there's follow-up then to make sure that it is corrected. So if it happens to be a truck that you determine during the pre-trip inspection that truck isn't safe to drive because of this issue, and it gets passed on to maintenance, make sure that the next time that driver comes out to get in that truck, there's some communication that shows them and indicates that has been addressed and it's no longer an issue. He's still going to perform a pre-trip inspection, which he or she should identify if there is an issue, but just follow up so it gets back around is kind of the key there. Now, during pre-trip inspections, there's just a ton of things that you want to look for. Pre-trip inspections have, depending on the vehicles, it could be stuff as simple as fluid levels. It could be stuff as simple as, are the wiper blades good? And they're going to check the brakes. If you have air brakes, everybody has to understand that there has to be a point when you drain the tanks and you get the moisture out of the tanks. Because if you have air brakes and there's moisture in there and they're not properly drained and maintained, you can have freezing in the wintertime, which will cause a problem with the brakes activating appropriately. So just make sure, based on the type of vehicle, that you check everything. Checking hoses, checking fluid levels and belts, all of those things that are in there, and you got to open up the hood, for a pre-trip inspection. It's not just sitting in the cabin looking around to see if there's any lights on, okay, because that doesn't really cut it. You want to look at everything from the trailer, whether or not your fifth wheel connection is right and the fifth wheel operates properly. Is your load right when you got the load on? Is it weight proportioning appropriately on the trailer, depending on what your load is? Is it secured properly prior to moving the vehicle? All of those things should be looked at and taken into consideration. If your vehicle is at a loading dock and the driver's going to pull away from the loading dock, before pulling away from the loading dock, are they getting out to check to make sure that the the dock release is done, that the ramp is pulled up so there's no forklift coming in and out when they're trying to pull away from the loading dock. All the load is in, secured or removed, and everything's done. So before they move that truck at all, they've got to check and make sure that everything is correct back there. Then once they do pull away from the dock, then they have to stop and get out and make sure that they go back and close the doors and everything. And that might sound kind of funny, but there's actually been cases where individuals have pulled away from the loading dock and somehow just forgot about the fact that, okay, now I've got to stop and go back and close the doors and secure them. And they were actually on road with the back doors open. Now, luckily, most of the time you've got large loads with pallets and things secure that aren't necessarily just going to fall out, but there's a potential there. So just making sure everything is secured before they move that vehicle at all is part of a pre-trip inspection, as well as the mechanics and maintenance of the vehicle. Stuff as simple in the wintertime as snow covering headlights, snow covering signals, and things of that nature, making sure that they're all checked. So all of those things are done now. Pre-trip inspections are not necessarily only done on that initial time the vehicle moves. So the vehicle's at the loading dock, they get their entire load, they're getting ready to head out. They're on the road for 2 hours, they pull off into a way station or pull off into a restaurant to grab lunch or whatever. When they come back out, they should then at least do a smaller, quicker pre-trip inspection, but they should still conduct that pre-trip inspection. It's not going to be as detailed and in-depth as it would be initially in the morning when they first head out, but at least take a walk around the vehicle, make sure everything still looks good, the tires and everything are looking good, the fifth wheel pin and connection looks good, and there's no obvious signs of any damage or any issues or concerns like that. But just making sure that's done each time really is going to help maintain a safe vehicle and a safe trip. So with that, the driver education portion that we talk about is going to be really dependent on your class of business, the size and weight and type of load that you're carrying or delivering, and also the geographic area that you cover. All those things are going to be taken into consideration when you look at the driver required education or training. So if you get new drivers in, what do you do to check those drivers out? You know, do you do a motor vehicle record check on them? What do you do to make sure that they have a clean driving record, and that if they have a CDL, that they've got all their proper paperwork in place, their physicals and their drug cards and all the stuff they have like that to make sure that everything is good? That's stuff that's critical, that you do that not only initially at the time of hire, but that you periodically go through and check that. Now with the CDL, there's requirements that they have to have it done at certain times and have to go in for their physicals and testing and everything else. But even if you don't have CDL requirements based on your type of vehicle, the load size and weight and requirements and everything else, you should still be doing this for your drivers. And not just for the drivers that are driving big trucks with big loads, but anybody that's driving any type of company vehicle. You should at least be periodically checking to see if they've got anything that's shown up on their motor vehicle record, you know, on their driving record. Most employees are honest. They're going to come and tell you if they've got a little glitch or if they had a speeding ticket or this or that, but you still want to be able to check that just to make sure. CDL requirements, absolutely. It's going to detail exactly what is required, and you're going to have to follow that. That's law in order for you to be able to put your vehicles and drivers out there. So just make sure that you understand what it is, what the requirements are, and that you have them documented in all of your records. Getting the CDL is one thing, but then documenting the recurring training, testing, and certifications is something that you have to have. When a truck's out on the road and they pull into a weigh station, they're going to have all kinds of questions asked of them. They're going to check the vehicle, they're going to check the driver and everything else, making sure that that driver's educated on what they need to know when they pull in there, because they're going to have questions from the state patrol or whoever's at that weigh station. Make sure that they understand what the expectations are for the type of vehicle and load they're carrying, so when they go there, they can answer in an educated fashion any questions that are asked of them, and that they can go in there and make sure that you look good when you pull in there. Because believe me, those people understand if a certain company, every time their truck comes into the weigh station, they have deficiencies or they have issues, that becomes something that affects you on your record. It affects you when you start looking at getting insurance, when you start looking at getting jobs and everything else. So that's pretty important to make sure you have that. Now, the specific vehicle training, again, depending on what you have, you're going to go over the way to drive that vehicle. It's going to drive a lot different on an 18-wheel tractor trailer as you are with a sedan or a minivan or something of that nature that you might have in your fleet also. Now, training could be classroom training. That could be classroom training that you provide, classroom training that the driver takes at a local technical college or at a local driving school or something of that nature. But all that training should be documented. You should have the certifications and everything written down. So if there's ever a question or concern, you have it there. And then also the on-the-road training. Over the road hours should be documented. Training, whether it's, again, in a formalized training program at a driving school or a technical college or something you do in-house, all of those things should be documented as far as what was done, when it was done, how it was done, who provided the training, and what kind of testing was done to make sure that that training was, productive. Annual reviews and evaluations. Now, this is something, obviously, there's certain things that you should do and then certain things you can do. So depending on your level of driving and what type of vehicles and load and everything, you may choose to have driver testing on an annual basis, or it may be required if they've got CDL and things of that nature. But again, that should be something that you're going to have a policy on. You're going to put that training policy together and determine what levels of training are going to be required, what we're going to have as far as our initial onboarding, what we're going to do annually or on a regular basis, and then how we evaluate those individuals with the driving expectations and stuff that you have in your policy. And then, of course, that again is all documented and kept in your records. Your continuing education and training, all that stuff, it's critical that you have this stuff properly documented. So as far as West Bend Mutual resources for this, we have a newsletter that goes out called Best Fleet Forward, and we have one called Tractor Factor. Tractor Factor first is one that's basically covers, tractor trailers and in large semi trailers, things with fifth wheel connections and things of that nature. So that is a newsletter that if you're not getting it already and you have those type of vehicles, please contact your West Bend or Argent Loss Control representative to make sure that they can get you on the email list so that you can receive that Tractor Factor newsletter. It has a ton of different information in there. It has different subject each time it comes out. It has a lot of good tips and things of that nature. And it also provides you other resources that you can utilize when you're considering your fleet and how you want to manage that. The Best Fleet Forward, that's a newsletter that covers any type of fleet. That could be a fleet of sedans, minivans, cube trucks, all the way up to tractor trailer, semi-trailers, tractors. So that's another newsletter that if you're not getting that now and that's something that would benefit you and your organization, please contact your West Bend Mutual or Argent Loss Control representative and they can get you on the list to get those newsletters. There's just a lot of good information in there that will help you. Weather-related concerns. So this is obviously something that hits very close to home in Wisconsin. Okay, so in Wisconsin, we have the winter weather and it's long, it's nasty, it's icy, it's snowy, and that's a big issue here. But we also have wet, summer weather and things of that nature. And unfortunately, at least I think it's unfortunate, we get up to some heat extremes. At times we're up in the 90s, close to 100. Well, all of those different things have different considerations when you talk about trucks and transportation and things of that nature. So we want to look at that and say, what are the weather extremes that we're going to have? What we look for in a vehicle safety program in January and February is going to be a little bit different than it is in July and August. We're still going to do the pre-trip inspections. We're still going to look at our tires and our vehicles and everything of that nature to see, what the condition of them are. But we've got to look at things a little different. The winter weather, we got to look at all of our fluids, make sure they're not freezing up. We want to make sure that our air tanks and stuff on our brakes are all drained and bled off so that we don't have moisture buildup in there that's going to freeze up and cause issues. You can have your windshield washer fluid, making sure that that's full because we have more salt and stuff that collects on the windows. And if that windshield washer fluid isn't the proper type, it can freeze up, cause icing on the windshield. So all of those things that we think of as kind of normal routine things when we're driving our personal vehicle, they're the same things we need to think about when we're driving commercial vehicles as well, only it's a lot I wouldn't say a lot more important, but it's a more of a issue when you're driving a vehicle that weighs, tens of thousands of pounds versus a personal sedan. Geographical considerations. Does your truck leave Wisconsin and drive to California? Does it leave Wisconsin and drive down to Arizona? Does it leave Wisconsin and drive out to the East Coast? So each of those different things are going to be considerations. If you have a vehicle leaving here in February and it's driving down to Arizona, you're going to have a big difference in weather concerns when they leave compared to their, to their destination. So keep all those things in mind when they're doing pre-trip inspections, when they're planning for their trip and everything else. Think about where they're going to be going. Wisconsin's relatively flat. Okay, so for the most part, driving vehicles in Wisconsin isn't a huge concern, but when you get out into the mountains and you're starting to drive up, some steep grades and things like that, you have bigger concerns and considerations for their braking, bigger concerns and considerations for the engine, being able to handle the different stresses and strains that are on it. So all of those things should be taken into consideration when they're doing a trip. Is think about the entire trip, not just where we're starting from, and what considerations do you have for weather and things of that nature. So the specific vehicle concerns, I kind of touched on that a little bit now. I mean, the bigger the vehicle, the heavier the vehicle, the harder and longer it takes to stop that vehicle. So if you have icy roads, wet roads, things of that nature that are slippery, you've got to take all those things into concerns, because the longer it takes to stop that vehicle, the greater chance of an accident occurring if you're not ready for it. So think about the size of vehicle, the type of vehicle, the way it handles, the load on the vehicle. You've got a flatbed trailer that has a large load on it. When you start to slow down, you turn a corner. How's that load affect the handling of the vehicle? If you have a liquid tank trailer or something of that nature, when you turn corners and that liquid sloshes and sways in the back, that's going to affect the way that vehicle's handled. If you're on slippery, wet, ice-covered roads, that has a huge impact. So the drivers have to really be cognizant of that and watch that when they're driving. Appropriate speed at any time. Appropriate speed on beautiful 75 sunny, days in Wisconsin or anywhere, or if it's 20 below, icy, snowy blizzard, you got to make sure that your speed is appropriate for the weather, the conditions, the vehicle, the load, the traffic, and everything else. Just make sure that you have proper speed whenever you're driving that vehicle to make sure that you're going to be able to control the vehicle in an emergency situation if needed. Mechanical concerns goes back to our discussion on pre-trip inspections. Make sure that that vehicle is mechanically sound before you step into that cab and go to drive anywhere. Go through the pre-trip inspection properly, check everything out, check it for weather-related potential issues with freezing, with overheating, everything else. Just make sure that it is mechanically sound in every way, and that way it should be able to hold up to the weather regardless of what type it is, as long as you look for it and prepare for it before taking off. Tires. Tires are obviously a massive thing. Depending on the type of vehicle, you're going to have different size of tires, different pressure of tires, and everything else. And you're going to want to make sure that the type of tire is appropriate for the weather. If you're primarily driving in snow-covered areas, snow-covered roads, then you're going to have a tire that's for that type of climate and that type of environment. But if you're going from snow down to dry, hot Arizona, then that tire is going to kind of have to be one that is a all-weather type tire that will somewhat, change and adapt to the weather that it's in. So just keep in mind when you're choosing tires and you're doing tire rotation on your vehicles to make sure that you're taking into consideration where they're going, what type of climate they might come into, and obviously what type of load they're carrying and things of that nature. That all goes into the tire selection process as well. And then the product load considerations, I touched on this a little bit earlier. If you're driving a large truck with a liquid tank product and commodity in the back, every time, most of those are baffled. You got baffles in that prevent the liquid from shifting too much and sloshing around too much, but it's still going to move to some degree. So when you're on slippery roads, if you're on windy roads, if you're on things of that nature where every time you turn or do this or that, that load in the back shifts or moves or sloshes, that's something that's got to be taken into consideration. And if a new driver who's used to always driving an enclosed box truck with pallet secured stuff switches and gets into a vehicle that has a liquid load tank or something like that, that's somebody who needs to go back to our prior slide and have training specific to that vehicle, specific to that load, so they understand how to operate and handle that vehicle on in normal considerations with normal weather and normal traffic, as well as in emergency situations if things start to go wrong and they want to make sure that they're able to handle it and prevent it from causing greater injury or things of that nature, or accidents. Resources that we have, there's more resources than this, but a couple of them we want to touch on here is the LC 1018 for winter driving. We actually have a very large library of resources for winter weather. Everything from when Samantha was talking earlier about slip, trip, falls and stuff like that. We have just a ton of stuff on that, as well as the driving and things of this nature. So these are a couple of the resources. The LC 1018, which covers stuff on, considerations on before you leave, your pre-trip, what to plan for, how to prepare for it, things of that nature. And tips for driving in the snow. And these are things that you might probably think that are pretty much common sense for us in Wisconsin. But sometimes it becomes one of those things where we do it so often, we stop thinking about the obvious and we kind of become programmed to just go out and get in and drive. So it's kind of like if you think about that first good snow we get in the winter and everybody all of a sudden is all over the road going in the ditch and everything else, because it's like they forgot how to drive in the winter and now we just got some snow. So things like that, these are resources that prior to the winter season coming, we should get this stuff out. We should get it to our drivers. We should have some training and education on it. We should touch on it prior to them having to actually deal with that environment, get it to them sooner rather than later. And then what to do if you're stranded in the snow. It's, again, seems like kind of common sense to us in Wisconsin, but as you're all well aware, sometimes drivers come from all over the place and they may not be used to that. So these are just tips that you guys can use that will really help you out. A lot of good resources. The driving on ice is just something that is obviously want to avoid it at all costs. I mean, if there's a way to not drive on ice, then that's the number one thing, just don't do it. But we also understand that you have product and things that have to get out to customers. So you got to get out there and drive, and you may be going along and all of a sudden there's some ice. So this is going to give you kind of some good ideas, thoughts, processes on how to deal with that. And so you can request this. If you have a WB Connect, you can go out and get this off of there. If not, just contact your West Bend Mutual Argent loss control representative, and they can certainly provide this for you along with some other resources. So then dash cameras, or cameras in general. Now, dash cameras we talk about because in most big trucks, that's pretty much what you have is a windshield. You don't really have a rear window and things of that nature that you're going to put a camera on, and you're dropping and changing trailers on a regular basis. So a rear camera isn't really that functional or realistic. But dash cameras in any type of vehicle, cameras are an excellent thing to have because they protect you, your drivers, your company, potentially, I should say, protect you guys from liability. Okay. So how many times have you seen where somebody gets in an accident and you have the driver of one vehicle and the driver of the other vehicle? You're getting two different total, stories of what happened. Hopefully there's witnesses around, other drivers, other people who saw it. But if there isn't anyone else around, it's only two vehicles, it becomes a he said, she said. And sometimes, unfortunately, the company with the big vehicle and the big perceived pocketbook winds up being the one that has to prove that they didn't do anything wrong in order to get out of liability. And sometimes it just becomes a litigious situation. So having cameras there really helps because you have that camera there, it records the entire situation. And then if something happens, you have that to back you up on whose fault it was, if any, and also what exactly took place. So if you're going to consider putting cameras in, you need to make sure that you have communication on it. Okay. So the last thing you want to do, obviously, is go out there and just put cameras in all the vehicles, and pretty soon a driver shows up and he climbs up in the cab and there's like, what's this? There's a camera there. It's not a good feeling. So you want to, communicate with them, educate them on what the camera is there for, what the benefits of the camera are to them and the company, and get them comfortable with the camera being there and the understanding of why it's there. Don't surprise them, because that doesn't typically turn out well. So the accident documentation is obviously the primary reason for it to be there, that we're going to document what happened, when it happened, how it happened, and who did what. So then when it comes down to potential liability, lawsuits, or anything else, this is going to save you tons of time, effort, and potentially money, depending on what it shows when you look at the recording. These are all benefits to the company as well as to the employee. Now, cost savings can come in just a number of different ways. You think about when you have an accident, if there's an injury to the employee, you're going to have some potential work comp claim there. If there's damage to the vehicle, you obviously have vehicle damage. If there's damage to the load or the product that's being carried, you could have potential problem with the loss there. You could have interrupted operations. You could have just a ton of different things that are going to cause money, loss. So the thing you want to look at is, if you can clearly document how the accident happened and whose fault it was, then there's a potential for mitigation to go and collect off of the party who was in the wrong. Now, it isn't always going to be that the other person's always at fault, right? I mean, there's a chance that your driver could possibly make a mistake, could do something that, caused an incident. But you got to keep in mind now that the documentation here could help at least clarify what took place, so that it might minimize the financial impact. It may not totally eliminate it, but it could minimize it. So vehicle cameras, dash cameras, if you have sedans, if you have vans, if you have vehicles that have, a solid vehicle without trailers that have rear windshield or windows and stuff like that, you can get the cameras that face front and back, one in the back, one in the front. And these aren't necessarily, there are cameras that have driver-facing cameras. That would be something that you as a company would have to determine whether or not you think that is a sensible move. Some drivers don't want a camera looking at them the entire time they're driving down the road. If you think that's something that would be beneficial, you would obviously want to discuss that internally and make that determination prior to purchasing those cameras. But there are camera programs that we have that you can talk to your loss control representative about, that they can suggest you, certain cameras. There's actually some that you could get a discount if you're referred through West Penn Mutual. And so just talk to your loss control representative to get more information on that. This is a link to one of our resources, and it talks about the dash cams and the offer here, which is, again, a bit of a discount off the normal retail price that you can get if you order these through West Penn Mutual, through our Silver Lining website there. And if obviously you don't need to copy this link down at this time. You can go out to our website and it'll be on there, or contact your loss control representative and they can direct you how to get this as well. So driver awareness and education, again, the tractor factor we talked about, that's primarily for larger rigs, semi-tractor trailers, things of that nature. Best fleet forward, that's pretty much for any vehicle that you would have in your company fleet, sedan to box trucks to on up the line. This would be something that would be helpful to you. And so contact your local or your loss control rep to make sure you're on that list to get those emailed to the and to anyone you want. If there's a certain person, you got a fleet manager, you got a maintenance director, you got somebody else that you want to receive this, just make sure that email gets shared with your loss control rep and they can get them added to the distribution list. We also have DVDs that we can provide that have a bunch of different things on it to help you as far as the overall fleet operations, safety, things of that nature. You have some that show specific ways. Samantha talked earlier about the fifth wheel pin pulling and things like that. We have certain videos that cover a lot of different things. We have our transportation team. The transportation team is made up of a number of our different loss control representatives, and they get together on a regular basis. And Samantha and Maggie and I are all three on that team. And what we do is go to look at different trends and losses and things of that nature, and that leads us to putting together resources and presentations to address those things. Similar to this webinar that we're doing now, that's all stuff that's done through our transportation team. So in summary today, we covered a lot of things. Hopefully you gained something out of this. Just want to kind of cover the main tops that we did. Samantha had the slip, trips, and falls in the beginning of our presentation, and she had a lot of good information and resources there. If there's anything else that you would like to get some information on that, again, reach out to your loss control rep and they can get that information for you. Maggie talked about manual material handling. And again, that is just a really wide topic when it comes to trucking and transportation, because it could be something as smaller as a letter all the way up to, a pallet full of heavy stuff. And it also has to do with handling of stuff with the truck itself. When you're doing things where you're moving and, pulling and pushing and things of that nature, all of those things come into that manual material handling area. And so if you want more information on that, again, reach out and we can give that to you. And then the topics that I just covered on motor vehicle accidents, those are the three areas that are, leading causes of employee injury at your companies, for transportation companies. And we want to do everything we can to minimize and lower those injuries and those incidents and inevitably the claims. West Bend has a multitude of resources available, just tons of stuff. We have to help create your policies. We can assist you with putting together a policy. We don't write the policy for you, but we will guide you through it, provide you resources, and assist you as you develop that policy with your staff. And that, of course, will help you to address. We talk about these loss drivers, but then your loss control representative can work with you directly to determine where your loss drivers are and can put together a program to deal with and address your specific loss drivers also. So contact any one of us, contact your loss control rep, and if you have any other questions, let us know. We all three thank you very much for your time today. Hopefully it was beneficial and hopefully you learned a lot. And again, if you have any other questions, please give us a call. Thank you very much and have a safe day. If there's any questions, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Samantha, but if anybody has questions, they can put them in the chat room now and we could answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point in the presentation, if any of the attendees have questions, either about, information we gave or specific resources that we mentioned during the presentation, feel free to write that in the chat box. Otherwise, our contact information is up. Please feel free to reach out. Okay, and with that, I'm starting to see participants leave the room. I've gotten some thank yous in the chat. So we'll go ahead and end the presentation at this point, but please do not hesitate to reach out afterwards if you need anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Goodbye.